Hello and welcome. It is time once again to let the world outside recede, to allow the noise and the haste of the day to soften into a distant murmur. Find a position of quiet comfort. Let your breathing slow and your thoughts drift. There is nothing to do, nothing to solve. Simply be present and listen. Tonight our story takes us to the sea. We journey to the brilliant, sun-drenched waters of the Mediterranean, a sea whose calm turquoise surface has cradled civilizations for millennia. It is a place of timeless beauty, of gentle waves lapping against ancient shores. But beneath this serene surface, a terrible and relentless engine of power moves through the water. It is a machine of wood and bronze. But its true fuel is human muscle, human pain, and human despair. We will go below its decks into a darkness rarely seen to witness a life of unimaginable hardship, a life chained to the brutal, unforgiving rhythm of the oar. There is nothing for you to do now but to relax and to listen. Your journey into sleep begins now. Our story begins in the autumn of the year 42 BCE. The Roman Republic is tearing itself apart. The assassination of Julius Caesar 2 years prior has plunged the world into a bloody and chaotic civil war. The men who now rule Rome, Octavian, Antony, and Lepidus, are hunting down Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, and the final decisive confrontation is imminent. To move their vast legions across the sea to Greece, they require a massive fleet. And to power that fleet, they require an unending supply of men. It is a time of immense demand for a very specific kind of human fuel. Far from the political machinations of Rome in the misty, forested heartland of Gaul, a young warrior named Cetrix knows nothing of this. His world is one of oak trees, tribal loyalties, and the ever-present threat of a rival clan. He is a warrior of the Aedui tribe, a man whose freedom is as natural to him as the air he breathes. His body is hard and lean, scarred from minor skirmishes, his hands calloused from gripping the leather of his shield and the ashwood of his spear. His life is governed by the seasons, the will of his chieftain, and the blessings of his gods. He is strong, he is proud, and he is free. He has never seen the great sea. His world ends in a blur of iron, dust, and screams. A Roman legion, securing the trade routes and putting down a minor tribal uprising, falls upon his village at dawn. The fight is short, brutal, and hopelessly one-sided. The disciplined lines of Roman infantry are an unforgiving meat grinder against the passionate but disorganized charge of the Gaulish warriors. Cetrix fights with the desperate courage of a man defending his home, but it is not enough. He sees his chieftain fall, a pilum jutting from his chest. He is disarmed, clubbed to the ground by the flat of a gladius, and his hands are bound tightly behind his back with a strip of rawhide. As he is dragged away, the last thing he sees is the smoke rising from the burning thatch of his family's hut. In the space of a single morning, he has ceased to be Cetrix, warrior of the Aedui. He has become a thing. He is chattel. He is a prisoner of war. The aftermath of the battle is a model of Roman efficiency. The dead are stripped of anything valuable. Survivors are sorted. The old and the very young, those who would not survive a long journey, are put to the sword with a chilling lack of ceremony. The women and children are herded into a separate group, destined for the domestic slave markets of Italy. The able-bodied men, like Cetrix, are the most valuable prize. They are the ones who will fetch the highest price, their strength destined to be consumed by the Republic's insatiable appetite for labor. Catrix is chained to a long line of his former comrades and rivals, a human chain of misery and defeat. The iron collar is cold and heavy against his neck. Any sign of resistance, any slowing of the pace, is met with the immediate stinging bite of a legionary's whip. He is now part of a coffle, a valuable piece of military surplus being marched south. The journey is a waking nightmare. They march for weeks, through forests and across plains, their bare feet cut and bruised by the hard Roman roads. The food is minimal, a handful of coarse grain in the evening, just enough to keep them moving. The thirst is a constant torment, their pleas for water often ignored by their guards. He watches as men he has known his whole life begin to break. Some succumb to disease, their bodies left by the side of the road. Others fall into a deep, silent despair, their eyes vacant, their spirits already dead. Catrix, however, holds on. A stubborn, defiant fire still burns within him. He is a warrior, will endure. He does not yet understand that the Romans have a purpose for this journey, a systematic process of breaking a man's spirit to make his body a more compliant tool. The long march, the hunger, the degradation, it is all part of the process of unmaking him. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, the air changes. It becomes heavy, damp, and tinged with a strange, sharp smell he has never known before. The smell of salt. The group is marched over a final rise, and he sees it for the first time, the Mediterranean Sea. It is a sight of terrifying, impossible scale. A vast, endless expanse of deep blue water, stretching to a horizon that seems a universe away. But it is not the water that captures his terrified attention. It is what sits upon it. The harbor of Massilia is teeming with Roman warships. These are not simple boats. They are monstrous, floating fortresses of dark timber, their prows armed with vicious bronze rams, their decks bristling with soldiers. He sees the triremes, the most common warships of the age, with their 3 banks of oars protruding from their sides like the legs of some enormous predatory insect. He hears the rhythmic creak and splash of a squadron practicing maneuvers in the bay, the sound of hundreds of oars hitting the water in perfect mechanical unison. It is the sound of absolute power. And as Catrix stands there, chained and filthy, he begins to understand. This is his destination. This is the fate for which his strength has been preserved. He is not destined for the mines or the fields. He is destined for the oar. The final stage of his descent begins. He and the other survivors of the march are sold unceremoniously to a man known as a manceps, a private contractor who supplies the Roman navy with equipment and personnel. In a dusty, sun-beaten yard near the docks, the final selection is made. Catrix and the other men are stripped naked, their bodies inspected like livestock. A grim-faced overseer, a former Marine with a network of scars across his face, walks the line. He feels Catrix's arms and back, checking for muscle. He forces his mouth open to inspect his teeth. He is looking for men with strong backs, sturdy legs, and the raw physical endurance to withstand years of brutal, repetitive labor. Catrix, with his warrior's physique, is exactly what he is looking for. He is herded into a new enclosure with other chosen men fellow Gauls, but also captured Cilician pirates, German tribesmen, and Illyrian rebels. They are a motley collection of Rome's defeated enemies, all sharing the same bleak future. They are not, however, immediately thrown onto a ship. They must first be trained. conditioned to forget their own rhythms and learn the single unified rhythm of the galley. In the training yard, under a relentless sun, they are introduced to the machine that will consume their lives. They are made to sit on crude wooden benches, arranged in the same tiered and cramped configuration as on a trireme. In front of each bench is a heavy wooden pole, a training oar set in a leather oarlock. For 10 hours a day, they practice the motion. They are taught the single complex stroke, the lean forward, the drop of the oar blade into the imaginary water, the powerful leg-driven pull through the water, and the sharp feathered recovery. A grizzled trainer, the Hortator, stands before them, beating out a slow, steady rhythm on a wooden block with a mallet. Any man who falls out of sync, whose form is clumsy, feels the immediate sting of the overseer's whip across his back. They are not being taught to be sailors. They are being taught to be components in a machine, to subordinate their individual movements to the single, unified pulse of the ship. Catrix, the proud warrior, must now learn to erase every instinct for individual action. His new god is the beat of the mallet. His new purpose is the perfect, mindless repetition of the stroke. The fire of defiance that sustained him is slowly, deliberately being starved of oxygen. He is being remade, forged into something new and terrible, a galley slave. After a week of this brutal, mind-numbing training on land, the day arrives when Kachurix and his fellow captives are deemed ready. They are not ready in the sense of being skilled, but in the sense of being broken. Their defiance has been replaced by a sullen, exhausted compliance. They are herded from the training yard down to the docks. The sound of the gulls in the bustling port a meaningless backdrop to their dread. They are led up a narrow gangplank onto the deck of a warship named Aquila the Eagle. For a brief moment, Ketrix feels the sun on his face and sees the vast expanse of the open sky. It is the last clean air he will breathe, the last unobstructed view he will have for a very long time. An overseer barks an order. The captives are forced towards a narrow, dark opening in the deck. A stairway leading down into the belly of the ship. The transition is a violent assault on the senses. As Catrix descends, the bright Mediterranean sun is instantly extinguished, replaced by a suffocating, almost tangible darkness. The air grows thick and hot, heavy with a stench so foul it makes him gag. It is a complex and horrifying odor, a layered miasma of old sweat, stale seawater, vomit, rot, and the sharp, acrid smell of human waste. This is the permanent, inescapable atmosphere of his new world. He is shoved forward into the rowing chamber. It is a vision of hell. The space is far smaller and more cramped than he could have imagined. 3 tiers of long, sloping benches stretch from one end of the ship to the other, packed so tightly together that there is barely room to move between them. The ceiling is so low that even a short man cannot stand upright. The only light comes from a few slatted gratings in the deck above, casting thin, dusty bars of light onto the scene below, illuminating a nightmarish tableau of human misery. Each bench is designed to hold several men, but it is the vertical arrangement that defines life here. Ketrix, being strong and new, is assigned to the lowest of the 3 tiers, the Thalamites. He is shoved onto a rough, splintery bench, his bare skin immediately chafing against the wood. An iron shackle is locked around his left ankle, the chain bolted directly to the ship's massive central beam. He is now a part of the ship's structure, as fixed and permanent as the keel. Above him, on the middle tier, are the Zygits, and above them, near the deck, are the Thronites, who handle the longest and heaviest oars. The men already on the benches are a gallery of human wreckage. They are gaunt, their bodies corded with the specific overdeveloped muscles of their trade, their skin pale and slick with a permanent film of sweat. Their eyes are hollow, and they move with a defeated, mechanical slowness. No one speaks. There is no camaraderie here, only a shared, silent endurance. Catrix is seated next to a man whose back is a crisscross tapestry of old whip scars. The man does not even look at him. His gaze is fixed on the back of the man in front of him, his posture one of weary resignation. Ow. An overseer moves down the narrow central gangway and shoves a heavier into Catrix's hands. It is a monstrous thing, far heavier than the training pole. It is a 15-foot length of fur, its handle worn smooth and slick by the sweat of countless hands before his. The oar must be threaded through a small, circular port in the side of the hull. An opening just large enough for the shaft, but not large enough to offer any view of the outside world. The port is fitted with a leather sleeve, an escoma, designed to prevent water from splashing in. But it is worn and leaky, and a constant, irritating trickle of cold seawater runs down the shaft of the oar, pooling on the floorboards and soaking his feet. The floor is a slick, disgusting morass of bilge water, spilled food, and human waste. Then the work begins. A sharp, piercing note from a flute signals the start. The Salusta, the rhythm keeper, takes his position on the central gangway. He holds a large wooden mallet in each hand. He strikes a heavy wooden block, and the sound echoes through the chamber like a death knell. Thump. It is a slow, steady, and inescapable beat. At the first sound, all the men around Catrix lean forward as one, their bodies moving in a single synchronized wave. THUMP. They slide back, their legs driving, their backs straining, pulling the heavier through the water. THUMP. They recover, pushing the handle forward, ready for the next stroke. Catrix, clumsy and new, struggles to keep time. His first few strokes are a disaster. He is too slow on the recovery, and the handle of his oar collides painfully with the back of the man on the bench above him, who grunts a curse. He puts the blade in at the wrong angle, and the force of the water nearly rips the oar from his hands. The price for his incompetence is immediate. The overseer's whip cracks through the air, and a searing line of fire erupts across Catrix's back. He cries out, a sound that is swallowed by the groaning of the timber and the rhythmic thump of the mallet. He learns quickly. He focuses on the back of the man in front of him, mimicking his every movement, forcing his body to submit to the rhythm. The hours that follow are an eternity of agony. His hands, unaccustomed to the work, are the first to go. The rough, salt-encrusted wood rubs them raw. Blisters form, break, and bleed, his blood mixing with his sweat to make the oar handle even more slippery. Splinters, large and small, embed themselves in his palms. His back, which he had always thought of as strong, screams in protest. The repetitive, twisting motion is a form of torture, a slow, grinding destruction of the spine. His legs, used for driving the stroke, turn to fire. His throat is parched, his lips cracked, but no water is offered. The heat becomes unbearable, the air growing hotter and more foul, with the exertion of 200 sweating, desperate men. This is his life now. It is a universe reduced to the most brutal and simplistic of elements. the splintered wood of the bench beneath him, the slick handle of the oar in his hands, the scarred back of the man in front, the searing pain in his own muscles, and the relentless, soul-crushing thump, ... thump of the mallet, a sound that will now govern his every waking and sleeping moment. The warrior Kachurix is a distant memory. He is now only a number, a source of propulsion, a slave chained to the eagle's wing. The mallet falls silent. The sudden absence of the rhythmic thump is a physical shock, a void in the air that is more deafening than the noise it replaced. For a moment, the only sound is the collective ragged gasp of 200 men, followed by a chorus of low groans as muscles, tortured for hours, finally seize up in protest. Kachurix slumps forward over his or his body, a universe of pain. Every fiber of his being screams. He tries to straighten his back, but the muscles lock in a fiery spasm. He looks at his hands. They are a bloody mess of torn blisters and splinters, barely recognizable as his own. This, he learns, is the end of the workday, but it is not a prelude to rest. It is merely a transition to a different form of misery. The first priority is water. The heat and exertion have left every man dangerously dehydrated, his throat a dry, rasping husk. An overseer and a ship's boy move down the central gangway, carrying a large wooden bucket and a single bronze ladle. This is the water ration. They move with an efficient, practiced cruelty. The boy dips the ladle into the bucket of lukewarm, brackish water and shoves it toward the first man's mouth. The man drinks desperately, greedily, before the ladle is snatched away and moved to the next. Each man receives one ladleful. No more. It is not enough to quench the thirst, only enough to keep the human machinery from breaking down completely. When the ladle reaches Kachurix, he drinks so fast he chokes, the stale water a brief, blessed relief that only serves to highlight the profound thirst that remains. Next comes the food. There are no tables, no plates, no ceremony. An assistant follows the water-bearer, carrying a large sack. He reaches in and pulls out lumps of what can barely be called bread. It is panis nauticus, or ship's biscuit, a rock-hard, twice-baked slab of barley flour and salt, designed for longevity, not nutrition or taste. Each man is given one piece. Kachurix gnaws at it, his teeth aching with the effort. The biscuit is dry as dust and scrapes his already raw throat. He must eat it quickly, hunched over to protect it from his neighbors, for in this world, a dropped ration is a lost ration. Bavadaver. Badawide Brenham Warren Ram Nine On other days the meal might be a scoop of cold pulse, a glutinous, tasteless porridge of boiled spelt or barley, ladled directly into their cupped, filthy hands. It is fuel, nothing more. A calculated number of calories to ensure that a man has just enough energy to pull the oar for another 12-hour shift. With the meager rations consumed, The period of rest begins. But there is no comfort to be found. The men are not unchained. Ketrix remains shackled to the bench, his world confined to a few square feet of filth. The problem of sanitation becomes immediately, horrifyingly apparent. There are no latrines on the rowing deck. Men are forced to relieve themselves where they sit. The waste collecting in the already foul bilge water that sloshes around their ankles with every movement of the ship. The stench, which was already overpowering, now intensifies, becoming a thick, inescapable part of the air they breathe. This is the primary reason the rowing deck is a breeding ground for disease. Sleep is a fleeting and tormented state. Ketrix tries to find a position to rest on the hard, splintery bench. He curls up as best he can, the iron shackle on his ankle digging into his skin, the chain restricting his movement. The air is still hot and suffocating. The groans of the men around him provide a constant, miserable soundtrack. Some men weep softly in the darkness. Others cry out in their sleep, haunted by nightmares of the lives they have lost. The ship itself is never quiet. The creaking of the timber, the slap of waves against the hull, and the scurrying of rats in the darkness are a constant presence. And then there is the itching. Lice are a universal affliction, and the filth breeds sores and rashes that make any true rest impossible. Ketrix dozes in a state of semi-conscious exhaustion, his body aching, his mind adrift in a sea of misery, only to be startled awake by the pain of his raw hands or the bite of a flea. In this pit of despair, he learns that there is no brotherhood, only a brutal hierarchy of survival. The veteran rowers, the men who have somehow endured years of this life, are callous and predatory. They know how to pace themselves during the rowing, how to conserve just enough energy to avoid the whip, and they know how to exploit the newcomers. During his second meal, Ketrix is not quick enough. The man next to him, a hulking Dacian with dead eyes, simply reaches over and snatches the biscuit from his hand, shoving it into his own mouth before Ketrix can even react. He looks to the overseer, but the guard, who saw the whole thing, merely smirks. Such matters are beneath his concern. It is the law of the jungle. Ketrix learns a vital lesson. There is no justice here. There is only what you can hold on to. The psychological toll of this routine is as devastating as the physical one. The clear divisions of his former life, day and night, work and rest, summer and winter all dissolve. His world is now measured in different terms. The rhythm of the mallet and the silence between. His memories of the green forests of Gaul, of the warmth of his family, of the thrill of the hunt, begin to feel distant and unreal, like stories that happened to someone else. The constant pain, the filth, the hunger, and the exhaustion create a fog that erodes the past. His identity as a warrior, a husband, a son, is being systematically erased, replaced by a new, horrifyingly simple one. He is the man on the lower bench, third from the bow. The silence is broken. The sharp, piercing note of the flute cuts through the darkness. The Salusta is back at his station. The mallet rises and falls. Thump. A collective groan rises from the 200 men. They have had perhaps 4 hours of this tormented rest. It is not enough. It will never be enough. Ketrix forces his aching body into position, his bloody hands gripping the slick handle of the oar. The brief, miserable respite is over. The machine must move. The first segment of his new life is complete. He has been fully processed. The free man is dead, and the galley slave has been born. Weeks bleed into months. The passage of time becomes a meaningless concept for Ketrix, marked only by the cycles of excruciating labor and tormented rest. His body, paradoxically, has adapted. The blisters on his hands have been replaced by thick, leathery calluses. The specific muscles required for rowing in his back, his legs, his shoulders have become unnaturally developed. Hard as knotted ropes, he has learned the grim arithmetic of survival, how to conserve his energy, how to eat the foul rations without vomiting, and snatches amidst the noise and filth. Initial fiery agony has subsided into a dull, permanent ache, and the horror of his situation has become a monotonous, soul-crushing normality. He has become a part of the machine. But the sea is not a machine, and he is about to learn that there are terrors far greater than the cruelty of the overseer. It begins subtly. For days, the ship has moved with a steady, predictable rhythm across a calm sea. But one afternoon, a change is felt throughout the whole. The gentle, rolling motion of the ship becomes a deeper, more pronounced swell, a sickening lurch that is out of sync with their rowing. From his position on the lowest bench, Ketrix can hear a new sound, a low, mournful moan as the wind begins to pick up, whistling through the rigging on the deck above. The air below grows heavy, hot, and strangely still, the pressure changing in a way that makes his ears ache. The veteran rowers around him exchange brief, anxious glances. They have felt this before. They know what is coming. The Salusta's mallet, which had been beating a steady, cruising rhythm, now changes its cadence. Thump, thump. Thum, P-thump. The beat is faster, more urgent. The overseers patrol the gangway, their voices sharp and menacing. Pull, you dogs. Put your backs into it. Command is to increase speed, to drive the ship forward, either to outrun the approaching storm or to meet it head-on. The effort intensifies. The men grunt, their muscles straining against the growing resistance of the agitated water. Sweat pours from their bodies, turning the filthy floorboards even slicker. Then the storm hits. The first great wave strikes the side of the ship like a battering ram. The entire vessel shudders violently, and a sound like a thunderclap echoes through the hull. Ketrix is thrown against the man next to him, the wood of the oar handle jamming painfully into his ribs. The ship heels over sharply, and for a terrifying moment, it feels as though it will not recover. The men on the upper benches cry out as they are nearly thrown from their seats. What follows is a descent into a special kind of hell, a chaos of sound and motion in near-total darkness. Ketrix cannot see the storm, can only experience it from the inside, a blind and chained passenger on a vessel being torn apart by the sea. The sound is overwhelming, a constant deafening roar as wind and water rage against the thin wooden shell of the hull. He hears the shriek of the wind, the crash of waves that sound like collapsing buildings, the sharp crack of a mast or a yardarm splitting on the deck above, the panicked, unintelligible shouts of the Marines and sailors. The motion is a violent, unpredictable torture. The ship is lifted up on the back of a colossal wave, a stomach-churning ascent that seems to go on forever. The oars of the lowest tier of rowers, sometimes lifting completely out of the water and meeting no resistance. Then comes the terrifying plunge as the ship slides down the other side of the wave. A sickening, weightless drop that ends with a bone-jarring crash as the keel slams into the trough. Men are thrown about, their chains the only thing preventing them from being crushed against the opposite wall. The waves are now so large that they are breaking over the ship entirely. The worn leather sleeves around the oars are useless. Torrents of cold green seawater blast through the oar ports with the force of a fire hose, drenching the men and flooding the rowing deck. The bilge water, that foul soup of waste and filth, rises rapidly, sloshing violently around their shins, then their knees, carrying with it the refuse of the entire voyage. And through all this, they must row. It is their only hope of survival. The Salusta, bracing himself on the gangway, never stops beating his mallet. His rhythm is frantic, desperate. He knows, as they all do, that if the ship loses headway and turns broadside to the waves, it will be swamped and capsize in an instant. They must keep the ship's ram pointed into the oncoming swells. The overseers are merciless, their whips cracking in the darkness, their blows falling on any man who falters. Row for your miserable lives. They scream, their voices barely audible above the storm's fury. Rowing becomes a near impossible task. As the ship rolls, Kacherix's oar is plunged deep into the water, the resistance immense, threatening to snap the wood or his own spine. The next moment, the ship lurches the other way, and his oar slices through empty air, throwing him forward. Men become violently seasick, their vomit adding to the already horrific stew sloshing at their feet. Panic begins to take hold. A young rower near the stern begins to wail, a high-pitched sound of pure terror, until an overseer smashes his mallet into the man's shoulder, silencing him with a grunt of pain. Discipline, even now, is absolute. For hours, this ordeal continues. Kacherix loses all sense of time, all thought. His existence is reduced to a single primal focus. Survive the next wave, pull the next stroke, endure the next crash. He is no longer a man. He is a creature of pure, terrified instinct, his body moving on autopilot, while his mind is numb with fear. Finally, after an eternity, the violence begins to subside. The crashing of the waves becomes less frequent. The rolling of the ship less severe, the frantic beat of the mallet slows to a steady, exhausted rhythm. The storm has passed. When the order finally comes to cease rowing, the men slump over their oars, their bodies bruised, battered, and trembling with a mixture of cold and adrenaline. The rowing deck is a scene of devastation, several inches of foul water sloshing back and forth, a few oars snapped, and one man on the upper bench lying still. His head having been smashed against a beam during the worst of the rolling, Kacherix has survived. He has faced the raw, untamable power of the sea and lived. But as he sits there, shivering in the darkness, the feeling is not one of triumph, but of profound helplessness. He has learned a new, terrible lesson. His life is not just at the mercy of the cruelty of his Roman masters. It is also a hostage to the indifferent violence of the natural world, a world he cannot see, cannot fight, and from which he can never, ever escape. The storm has passed, but it has left a deep and lasting wound upon the ship and its crew. The immediate violent terror is replaced by a slow, creeping horror that is in many ways worse. The rowing deck, which had been merely squalid, is now a flooded, pestilential swamp. The storm surge has churned up the accumulated filth of months from the bottom of the bilge, creating a foul, knee-deep soup of seawater, human waste, and rotting food.
Oh.
The air is thick with a damp chill and an almost unbreathable stench. The men, already weakened by the ordeal of the storm, are left to sit and row in this cold, disgusting water. Their bodies raw and their resistance shattered. These are the perfect conditions for the next great enemy to rise from within: disease. It starts with a single man, a rower on the bench behind Catrix. First, it is just a groan, a tightening of the stomach. Then come the violent cramps that double the man over, his face pale with agony. Then comes the dysentery, the bloody flux, the most feared of all shipboard illnesses. In the impossibly cramped and unsanitary conditions of the rowing deck, containment is not an option. There is nowhere for the sick man to go, no way to isolate him from his fellows. He is chained to his bench, surrounded by others, a walking, suffering epicenter of contagion. Within 2 days, the sickness has spread like a fire through dry timber. The groans of the first man are now a chorus. The foul air becomes thick with the specific sickening odor of the disease. Men are too weak to pull their oars effectively, their strokes clumsy and erratic, disrupting the rhythm of the entire ship. The Salusta's mallet seems to mock their agony, its steady, implacable beat a rhythm that their tortured bodies can no longer obey. The overseer's response is not one of compassion, but a brutal pragmatism. The ship must move. The oars must pull. Their first and only medicine is the lash. The whip cracks, striking the backs of men who are already convulsing with cramps. The sting of the leather, a sharp counterpoint to the deep internal fire in their guts. Catrix watches this unfold with a growing sense of cold dread. He feels the first stirrings of the sickness in his own stomach, and a profound animal fear takes hold. He does what he can to survive, refusing the meager food ration, knowing it is likely contaminated, and drinking as little of the foul water as possible. He tries to keep his space on the bench as clean as he can, a futile gesture in a world awash with filth. He witnesses the brutal calculus that governs their lives. A man on the upper tier becomes too weak to even lift his, or slumps forward, his body trembling, his breathing shallow. He is no longer an asset, he is a liability. His inability to row is a drag on the 2 other men on his bench and a disruption to the ship's speed. An overseer confers with the ship's commander, who briefly appears at the top of the hatchway, his face a mask of disgust as he peers into the darkness below. An order is given. Overseer and an assistant move to the sick man. With a hammer and chisel, they strike the pin from his shackle, freeing him from his chain. For a fleeting, delirious moment, the sick man might believe he is being taken to a place of rest. But there is no sick bay on a Roman warship. The 2 men grab the dying rower by his arms and legs, drag him down the central gangway to a cargo hatch, and unceremoniously heave his body into the sea. There is no prayer, no ceremony. One moment he is there, the next he is gone. The problem has been solved. A spare rower, one of the reserve slaves kept chained in the ship's hold, is brought up to take his place. This cold, pragmatic cruelty applies to all forms of weakness. The daily work of rowing is fraught with the risk of injury. In the days after the storm, with the sea still unsettled, a rower near Catrix misjudges a swell. His oar catches a crab, digging into a rising wave instead of pulling through it. The sea's immense leverage rips the oar handle from his grasp. The huge wooden shaft swings back with incredible velocity, striking the man next to him with a sickening crunch of breaking bone. The injured man screams, his arm clearly broken, but his cries are met with indifference. He cannot row. He is useless. He, too, is unchained and discarded into the waves. Even minor injuries can be a death sentence. The splinters in Catrix's hands have become deeply embedded, the skin around them red and inflamed. The constant friction of the iron shackle has rubbed his ankle raw, the open sore weeping in the filthy water. In this environment, any break in the skin is an open invitation to infection. He watches as the man whose biscuit was stolen begins to sicken. A small cut on the man's leg, ignored for days, has become a swollen purple mass. A fever sets in, and the man begins to shiver uncontrollably. Within a day, he is delirious. The next morning, his place on the bench is empty. Catrix now understands the true nature of his existence. He is a disposable component, a piece of biological machinery with a limited lifespan. His health and survival are of no concern to his masters beyond his ability to pull the oar. If he sickens, if he is injured, if he breaks, he will be replaced as simply and unsentimentally as a cracked or a frayed rope. This realization fosters not a sense of brotherhood among the rowers, but one of deep primal paranoia. The man coughing next to him is not a comrade in suffering, but a potential source of his own death. The men become suspicious of each other, hoarding their meager rations. Recoiling from anyone who shows the slightest sign of weakness, the outbreak of the flux eventually burns itself out. It leaves a dozen empty spaces on the benches, quickly filled by new men from the hold. The ship rows on, but Catrix is a changed man. The physical brutality, the crushing labor, the constant hunger, he had come to understand these as the terms of his life. But now he is burdened by a new, colder terror. He is haunted by the knowledge that his life is utterly without value. He's not a prisoner to be kept or a slave to be maintained. He is a consumable resource, and his only purpose is to be entirely used up. Weeks of monotonous, back-breaking labor followed the outbreak of disease. The ship, the Aquila, plies the waters of the Adriatic, part of a larger squadron hunting the fleets of Brutus and Cassius. For the men below deck, the world is an unchanging cycle of pain, hunger, and exhaustion, their existence measured only by the relentless beat of the mallet. The memory of the storm has faded into a dull trauma, replaced by the grinding reality of the everyday. Catrix has settled into this grim routine, a state of living death, where hope is a dangerous and long-forgotten luxury. But the purpose of this warship is not merely to patrol. It is to fight, and he is about to experience the full, terrifying violence of naval combat from the worst possible vantage point. The change, when it comes, is abrupt. A series of sharp, staccato trumpet blasts from the deck above cuts through the air. It is a sound Catrix has never heard before. Down on the rowing deck, the Salusta immediately changes his rhythm. The slow, steady beat of cruising speed is replaced by a rapid, urgent thump-thump, the signal for battle pace. The overseers, who have been listlessly patrolling the gangway, are suddenly alive, their voices sharp, their whips uncoiled. Faster, you filth. Faster. The honor of the eagle is at stake. Pull for Rome. A new kind of energy, a mixture of terror and adrenaline, floods the rowing deck. The men, who had been conserving their strength, now throw their entire weight into every stroke. The ship seems to come alive, surging through the water with a new sense of purpose.
Oh.
Kachorix can hear the frantic sounds of preparation from the deck above, the clatter of Marines putting on their armor, the thud of grappling hooks being piled on the deck, the sharp commands of the ship's captain. They are not running from a storm. They are running towards a fight. Then, the true ordeal begins. A new command is bellowed down the hatchway, ramming speed. The Salusta's mallet becomes a frantic, impossible blur of motion. Its beat so fast it is almost a continuous roar. This is a demand for an all-out anaerobic sprint, an effort that the human body cannot maintain for more than a few minutes. It is a demand that will be met, because the alternative is death. The whips of the overseers become a constant presence, cracking across the backs of any man whose stroke falters even for an instant. Catrix's world dissolves into a red haze of pure, agonizing effort. His lungs burn as he gasps for the foul, unoxygenated air. His heart hammers against his ribs, a frantic counter-rhythm to the mallet's beat. The muscles in his back and legs, already pushed to their limits, scream in protest. Sweat pours into his eyes, blinding him. The only things that exist are the oar in his bloody hands, the scarred back of the man in front of him, and the desperate primal need to pull for one more stroke. The entire ship trembles with the force of their exertion and the speed of its passage through the water. The roar of the sea against the hull rising to a deafening crescendo. The anticipation is a unique and exquisite form of torture. Chained in the darkness, Kachurix cannot see the enemy ship. He has no idea how close it is, or from which direction they will strike. He is a blind and helpless component in a guided missile, hurtling towards an imminent violent impact. He pulls and pulls, every second, stretching into an eternity, his mind numb with a mixture of terror and exhaustion, waiting for the inevitable crash. It comes with a sound that is beyond comprehension, a sound that is felt as much as it is heard. A deafening, apocalyptic roar of splintering wood and screeching bronze as the Aquila S ram smashes into the side of the enemy vessel. The force of the impact is cataclysmic. The ship lurches to a sudden violent halt, and a shockwave travels through the deck, throwing the rowers forward with incredible force. Kachurix is slammed against the bench in front of him, the hard wood knocking, the wind from his lungs. Men scream as they are injured in the collision. Their limbs broken, their heads smashed against the timber. Sickening crack echoes from the upper tier as an oar, caught in the wreckage of the other ship, snaps.
Oh.
Its heavy inboard end sweeping back and crushing the man who held it. The sounds of combat erupt directly above their heads. Catrix hears the heavy thud of grappling hooks biting into the enemy deck, followed by the metallic clang of the boarding ramp being dropped. Then comes the sound of the fighting, a chaotic, terrifying symphony of screams. The clash of gladius against shield, the wet, percussive sound of blows landing on flesh and bone. He can hear the roar of the Roman Marines as they charge and the desperate cries of the enemy sailors. The rowers are now given the order to hold water, to use their oars to brace the two ships together, to prevent the enemy from pulling away. They are a living clamp, chained to the spot, forced to listen to the slaughter happening just a few feet above. It is a position of absolute impotence. A stray spear thrust through the deck could kill any one of them. If the battle turns and the ship is set on fire, they will burn alive, trapped in their iron shackles. If their own ship has been critically damaged in the ramming, it could be taking on water, and they would be the first to drown. A new sound adds to the chaos, the hiss and crackle of Greek fire, the dreaded incendiary weapon of naval warfare. The air in the rowing deck grows thick with the smell of smoke and burning pitch. Panic, raw and primal, begins to set in. Some men begin to pull at their chains, their knuckles raw and bloody, their whimpers of terror ignored by the overseers. Their fate is entirely in the hands of the soldiers fighting in the sun above. After what feels like a lifetime, the sounds of fighting begin to subside. The desperate screams are replaced by the triumphant shouts of the Roman Marines. The battle is won. The mallet begins to beat a new, steady rhythm, the order to back water. To pull their ship free from the sinking wreckage of the enemy vessel, the men, running on pure adrenaline, obey. The ship groans and pulls free. The rowing deck is a wreck. Several men are dead or gravely injured, their places silently taken by more slaves from the hold. The air is thick with smoke, but the mallet beats on. There is no time for rest or recovery. The fleet is reforming. Catcherix's body trembling uncontrollably. His mind, scarred by the terror of the last hour, once again falls into the familiar rhythm. He has survived. But the experience has stripped away any final, lingering illusion about his life. He is not a prisoner, not even a slave. He is fuel. Fuel to be shoveled into the furnace of Rome's wars, to be consumed without a second thought. All in the service of a victory he will never see, and a glory he will never share. Years pass. The exact number is impossible for Catcherix to count. Time is no longer measured in seasons or festivals, but in the slow erosion of his own body and the endless succession of faces on the benches around him. The war against Caesar's assassins ended long ago, but Rome's wars are eternal. The fleet he serves now fights pirates in Cilicia, then suppresses a revolt in Sardinia. The names and the enemies change. The life below deck does not. Catcherix has survived the storms, the battles, and the plagues. He has endured. But the man who endures is not the man who was first chained to the bench. The warrior from Gaul is a ghost, a distant memory from another man's life. What remains is something else entirely, a creature perfectly and horrifically adapted to its environment. His body is a testament to his brutal trade. He's no longer the lean, well-proportioned warrior who was captured. He's a deformed, asymmetrical being, his muscles shaped not by combat, but by the singular, repetitive motion of the oar. The muscles in his right arm, his back, and his legs are massively overdeveloped, thick, knotted cords of sinew. His left side, by contrast, is weaker, almost atrophied. He has a permanent stooped posture, his spine curved from a decade of hunching forward on the bench. His hands are no longer hands in any recognizable sense. They are gnarled, calloused claws. The fingers permanently curled into the shape of the oar handle, unable to fully straighten. The sharp, acute pain of his early years has been replaced by a deep, grinding, and permanent ache that lives in his bones. It is in his lower back, his shoulders, his knees. It is a constant low-level thrum of suffering that is as much a part of him as his own heartbeat. He has grown so accustomed to it that he barely notices it anymore. In the same way, a free man might not notice the air he breathes. It is simply the background noise of his existence. The physical decay, however, is nothing compared to the erosion of his mind. The man named Catcherix is gone. The name itself is a hollow sound, a word he has not heard spoken in years. The overseers do not use names. The men are referred to by their position. Third bench, upper tier, or you bowman He is an object, a function. His memories of his past life, the green of the forests, the face of his wife, the taste of fresh water from a stream have faded into a series of dim, disconnected images. They have no emotional weight anymore. They are like scenes from a story he was told long ago, and he is no longer sure if they were ever real. His world has shrunk to the dimensions of his prison. His senses, once attuned to the snap of a twig in the forest or the movement of game, are now focused on a new, more limited reality. His hearing is preternaturally sharp, able to distinguish the subtle changes in the salustices rhythm that signal a change in speed or a coming maneuver. He can tell the mood of the overseer by the sound of his footsteps on the gangway. His sight is accustomed to the perpetual twilight below deck, and his vision is focused on a single point: the scarred and sweating back of the man on the bench in front of him. This man's back is his sun, his moon, his entire horizon. Language has withered away. The rowers are a constantly shifting population of captured men from every corner of the known world: Germans, Thracians, Syrians, Numidians. There is no common tongue. The only communication is a primal language of grunts, curses, and the occasional desperate cry of pain. Ketrix's own Gaulish language has died in his throat from disuse. The words are gone, the memories they were attached to now inaccessible. He is a veteran now, one of the gaunt, silent figures he had feared and despised upon his arrival. He has become what he beheld. He knows the grim calculus of survival. He eats the foul food, he drinks the brackish water, he pulls the oar. He has learned to dissociate, to retreat into a small, hard kernel of consciousness deep within himself, a place where the pain and the misery cannot fully reach. He lets his body perform the mechanical motions, while his mind goes blessedly blank for hours at a time. A new captive is chained to the oar next to him, a young, defiant Iberian with fire in his eyes. Kecherix sees the same terror and rage that he himself once felt. The young man tries to speak to him, to forge a connection, but Kecherix does not respond. He does not even look at him. Pity is a useless expenditure of energy. Connection is a liability. The boy will either learn to survive, or he will die. It is of no consequence to Kecherix. His only concern is the rhythm, the oar, and the scarred back of the man in front. The fire in the young man's eyes will be extinguished soon enough. Kecherix has seen it happen 100 times. He is the perfect galley slave. The system has succeeded completely. It has stripped him of his name, his past, his language, and his humanity. It has left only the part that is useful, a body brutally conditioned to perform a single task, powered by a spirit that has been so thoroughly crushed that it no longer dreams of rebellion or escape. It dreams of nothing at all. He is a ghost in a machine of wood and iron, pulling his or toward a destination he will never see, for a cause he will never know. To the Roman state, a galley slave was a resource, a piece of biological machinery subject to the same cold calculus as a coil of rope or a bronze ram. A coil of rope was expected to last a certain number of campaigns before it frayed and was discarded. A bronze ram could withstand a certain number of impacts before it cracked and was melted down. No man chained to the oar was expected to provide a certain number of years of propulsion before his body inevitably broke. For Kecherix, after a decade of relentless superhuman exertion, that breaking point was now approaching. The change is not sudden, but a slow, creeping erosion. It begins as a new kind of weakness, a deep, cellular exhaustion that no amount of rest can cure. The massive, overdeveloped muscles on his back and arms, once his engine, are beginning to waste away, replaced by the persistent, grinding pain of worn-out joints and ligaments. He finds it harder and harder to take a full breath, his lungs scarred by years of breathing the foul, stagnant air. A dry, hacking cough becomes his constant companion. The overseers, with their practiced eyes for human frailty, notice the change. The slight falter in his stroke, the fraction of a second he lags behind the beat, the new slowness in his recovery. The whip, which for years had largely passed him by as a veteran who knew the rhythm, now finds his back with renewed frequency. Less than the lash no longer produces the desired effect. In his youth, the sting would trigger a surge of adrenaline, a desperate burst of strength. Now, it only produces a dull grunt of pain. The signal is sent to his muscles, but the muscles no longer have the capacity to respond. He is a machine wearing out. The inevitable day comes during a long, arduous patrol in rough seas. The ship is rowing against a strong headwind, and the mallet's beat is slow but powerful, demanding immense strength on every single stroke. Hour after hour, Kachurix pulls, his body screaming, his vision tunneling to a small gray point. He feels a sharp tearing sensation in his shoulder, and a wave of white-hot pain washes over him. His arm goes limp. He cannot complete the stroke. He slumps forward over the oar, his body trembling, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The rhythm of the bench is thrown into chaos. Other two men on his struggle to control it without his strength, cursing him. The Salusta's mallet continues its relentless beat. The ship does not stop for one broken man. The overseer strides down the gangway, his face not angry but impatient. Like a craftsman looking at a broken tool, he prods Catrix with his whip. Up, pull you dog. Catrix tries to rise, tries to grip the oar, but his shoulder gives way and he collapses again, his head hitting the filthy floorboards. The overseer sighs, a sound of pure administrative annoyance. This component is now officially broken. He calls for an assistant. They bring a hammer and a heavy iron spike. With a few sharp, practiced blows, they strike the pin from the bolt of Catrix's shackle. The iron ring, which has been a permanent part of his body for a decade, falls away from his scarred and swollen ankle. The sudden, unfamiliar lightness of his leg is a strange and disorienting sensation. He is now officially detached from the machine. Two guards haul his limp body from the bench. He is too weak to resist. They drag him down the central gangway, his bare back scraping against the rough, splintery wood. There is no ceremony to his departure. His benchmates do not look up. They are already struggling to adapt to the new man from the hold, who is being chained in his place. Catrix has ceased to exist for them. He is thrown into the ship's dark, rat-infested hold, a place reserved for spare equipment and human wreckage. He lies there for days, drifting in and out of a feverish, pain-filled consciousness as the ship makes its way to the nearest port. For a man in his condition, this is the end of the line, and there are only a few possible destinations. If the port were in Hispania or Sardinia, near one of Rome's great mining operations, he might have been sold for a handful of copper coins to a mine overseer. His last days would have been spent in the total darkness underground, hauling rocks until he collapsed for the final time. It would have been a change of scenery, but not an improvement in circumstance. But the ship is not headed to a mining province. It docks at a small provincial military outpost on the coast of Illyria. It is a place with no market for a broken-down slave. Here, the process of disposal is much simpler. Catterics, along with 3 other men who are too sick or too old to be of any further use, are dragged up onto the sunlit deck. The bright, clean light is a physical blow, and he shuts his eyes against the painful glare. He is then hauled down the gangplank and thrown onto the hard stone of the quay. An overseer tosses a single stale biscuit onto the ground next to him, a final, contemptuous gesture. Without another word, the gangplank is raised, the mooring ropes are cast off, and the trumpets sound. Catterics, lying on his side, forces his eyes open. He watches as the Aquila, his home, his prison, and his entire world for 10 years, slowly pulls away from the dock. He sees the banks of oars begin to move, rising and falling in their familiar, relentless rhythm. He sees the new man in his old position, a fresh body to be consumed by the endless hunger of the sea. The ship grows smaller and smaller until it is just a speck on the horizon, and then it is gone. Catterics is left alone on the quay, the sounds of the bustling port a world away. He is, for the first time in a decade, a free man. But the freedom is a cruel joke. His body is a twisted ruin, his shoulder is useless, and he is starved and sick. He cannot work, he cannot walk more than a few feet. He does not speak the local language. He owns nothing but the filthy loincloth he wears. He looks at his gnarled hands, perfectly shaped for an oar and for nothing else. He has been used up completely, his life's energy poured into the Roman war machine. And now that he is empty, he has been discarded. His inevitable quiet end, here on the stones of a foreign port, is no longer a matter of years, but of days, perhaps even hours. This is the galley slave's retirement. This is his reward. The story of Catterics ends here, on the cold stones of a foreign dock. His final hours are a slow fade into darkness, his last sight the vast indifferent sea that was his prison. His last sensation, the memory of a freedom so distant it might as well have been a dream. His fate was the most common one for a galley slave, to be used until broken and then to be discarded. His body, once a proud vessel of a warrior spirit, is now just another piece of human refuse left in the wake of Rome's relentless advance. He is a statistic, an anonymous casualty of the engine that powered an empire. And yet his story, as brutal and as final as it is, does not represent the entirety of the experience of the men who pulled the oars for Rome. The reality, like history itself, is more complex. The image of the perennially chained slave, whipped into submission, is a powerful one, but it is not the only truth. During much of the Roman Republic and the early empire, the majority of rowers in the Roman military fleet were not slaves at all. They were free men, known as remiges. Often they were from the poorest classes of Roman society, the proletary citizens who owned no land and for whom military service was one of the only paths to a steady wage and a future. These free rowers were considered skilled professionals. The art of pulling a heavy or in perfect unison with hundreds of other men, of responding instantly to the complex rhythms that dictated a ship's speed and maneuverability, was a difficult skill to master. These men were enlisted soldiers, just like the Marines who fought on the deck above. They received regular pay, rations, and the promise of land or a pension upon completion of their service. Their lives were incredibly hard, the work grueling, and the discipline ironclad, but they were not slaves. They were serving Rome, and they did so with a measure of professional pride. The mass impressment of prisoners of war and condemned criminals like creaks into the oar banks was often a measure of desperation, a response to the massive existential crises that periodically shook the Republic, the great civil wars, the war against Sextus Pompey, the constant fight against piracy. These conflicts required the creation of huge fleets almost overnight, and the demand for rowers far outstripped the supply of willing recruits. It was in these moments of crisis that the Roman state turned to its most desperate and disposable populations, filling the benches with the captives of its conquests. And even for these men, condemned to a life of chained misery, there sometimes existed a final, almost unbelievable possibility, a glimmer of hope. On the eve of a truly decisive naval battle, when the fate of empires hung in the balance, a Roman commander might resort to the most powerful tool of motivation he possessed. We can imagine another ship on another sea years after the death of Catrix. The fleet is preparing for a cataclysmic battle, perhaps the great clash at Actium that will decide the fate of the world. On the rowing deck, the men are a mixture of sullen captives and hardened criminals, men with nothing to lose. The air is thick with the familiar tension before a fight. But then, something different happens. The main hatch is thrown open, and a brilliant shaft of sunlight lances into the darkness. A high-ranking officer, perhaps Agrippa himself, stands silhouetted against the light. His voice, amplified by the acoustics of the chamber, booms over the assembled men. Men who pull the oars of this fleet, he might declare. Today you do not fight for Rome, you do not fight for Octavian, you fight for yourselves. The battle ahead will be the greatest this sea has ever known. We require from you not the work of slaves, but the fury of free men. And so I make this promise. On the honor of the Senate and people of Rome, if we are victorious today, every man on these benches, every captive, every criminal will be granted his freedom. A moment of stunned, disbelieving silence hangs in the air. Freedom. It is a word that has no meaning in this place, concept as alien as the sun. Then a single hoarse cheer erupts from one of the benches, and is instantly taken up by another and another, until the entire deck is a deafening roar of raw, desperate hope. Men who were just moments ago slumped in a state of near death are now alive, their eyes burning with a light that had long been extinguished. They are no longer slaves. They are men with a chance, a single, desperate chance to reclaim their lives. When the Salusta's mallet begins to beat the rhythm for battle speed, the response is not the usual grudging, whipped-in effort. It is an explosion of pure, unadulterated power. The men pull with a strength they did not know they possessed, their own shouts of fury and hope joining the rhythm of the mallet. They are pulling for their lives, for their futures, for the memory of the men they once were. This was the ultimate pragmatism of the Roman system. It could crush a man, as it did Catrix, reducing him to a disposable tool. But it could also, when it served its purpose, offer him the ultimate prize, transforming him from a broken slave into a furious engine of victory. Whether the promises were always kept is a matter lost to history. But for the men on the benches, in that moment before the final battle, the promise was all that mattered. It was a single, brilliant ray of light in a world of profound and unending darkness. The story of a single man, like Catrix, is a powerful but incomplete lens through which to view the past. His suffering, while immense, was a single, anonymous gear in a machine of almost unimaginable scale and complexity. To truly understand the world that created and consumed him, we must pull back from the claustrophobic darkness of the rowing deck and look upon the Roman navy, the classis Romana, as a whole. For centuries, this vast organization was the undisputed master of the Mediterranean, the guarantor of the Pax Romana, and the instrument of the eagle's dominion over the known world. It was a system of ships, bases, and men that represented one of the greatest logistical achievements of the ancient world. During the chaotic civil wars of the late Republic, the period of Catrix's enslavement, Roman fleets were often vast ad hoc creations raised by powerful generals to meet a specific threat, and often disbanded after the conflict. But with the rise of Augustus and the birth of the Roman Empire, this changed. Augustus understood that a lasting peace required a permanent professional navy. He established the first standing fleets, creating a naval power structure that would endure for centuries. The two jewels of this new system were the great Praetorian fleets, stationed in Italy itself. The first and most powerful was the classis Missinensis, the fleet of Misenum. Its home port was a massive purpose-built naval base nestled in the Bay of Naples. Under the watchful gaze of Mount Vesuvius, Portus Julius, as it was known, was an engineering marvel. It consisted of an outer and an inner harbor, linked by a channel, providing a vast, sheltered anchorage for hundreds of warships. The base was a city in itself, with enormous ship sheds for repairs, sprawling barracks for the sailors and marines, administrative buildings, and vast warehouses, or horia, for storing everything from sails and rope to the hardtack biscuits that fed the crews. From this single strategic point, the fleet of Misenum could project Roman power across the entire western Mediterranean, from the shores of Gaul to the Pillars of Hercules. On the other side of the Italian peninsula, guarding the Adriatic and the eastern Mediterranean, its sister fleet, the classis Ravinatus, based at the port of Ravenna, located in the marshy delta of the Po River. Ravenna was another formidable naval station. Its fleet was the primary guardian against piracy from the Illyrian coast and served as a crucial link to the legions stationed in Greece and the East. Together, Misenum and Ravenna formed an iron pincer, ensuring that the sea, which the Romans called Mare Nostrum, our sea, truly belonged to them. Beyond these two great central fleets, a network of smaller provincial fleets enforced Roman will in every corner of the empire. The classis Britannica patrolled the cold, choppy waters of the English Channel, guarding against raids and supporting the legions in Britain. The classis Germanica navigated the treacherous currents of the Rhine, a vital component of the frontier defense against the Germanic tribes. Other fleets operated on the Danube, the Black Sea, and even the rivers of Mesopotamia, a testament to the Navy's adaptability and reach. The ships that comprised these fleets were a varied collection of specialized tools, each designed for a specific purpose. The most famous, the vessel that Catrix knew as his entire world, was the trireme, or triremus. It was the versatile backbone of the fleet for centuries. Typical trireme was about 120 feet long. A slender, elegant vessel, built for speed and maneuverability. Its primary weapon was the bronze-sheathed ram, or rostra, at its prow, designed to smash the hulls of enemy ships. It was powered by approximately 170 rowers, arranged in 3 tiers, and carried a complement of about 30 marines for boarding actions, as well as the sailors needed to handle the single, large square sail that was used for cruising but stowed during battle. For greater firepower, the Navy employed larger, heavier warships, most notably the quinquereme or quinqueremes. These were the battleships of their day. Larger and wider than a trireme, their name, meaning five-oared, did not refer to 5 banks of oars, an arrangement that would have been impossibly clumsy. Instead, it likely referred to 5 rowers per vertical section, with 2 men on the top 2 oars and 1 on the lowest. This allowed for more propulsive power without sacrificing too much stability. A quinquereme was less maneuverable than a trireme, but it was a much more stable fighting platform. It could carry a larger contingent of Marines, sometimes up to 120 men, and its deck had space for siege engines like the ballista, the giant crossbow, or the catapulta, which could hurl heavy stones, turning the ship into a piece of mobile artillery. But the true workhorse of the imperial fleets, especially during the long peace of the Pax Romana, is a smaller, more nimble vessel. The Liburnian, or Liburna, originally a design used by the pirates of Illyria. Its effectiveness was so great that the Romans adopted it as their own. A Liburnian was a bireme with 2 banks of oars, was smaller, lighter, and significantly faster than a trireme, making it the perfect vessel for patrolling, scouting, and chasing down pirates. These swift ships, operating in small squadrons, were the police force of the Mediterranean, ensuring that the vital grain shipments from Egypt and Africa could reach Rome unmolested. This collection of ships was organized with typical Roman military precision. A fleet was commanded by a prefect, a man of high equestrian rank appointed by the emperor. Under him, each ship had its own captain, the triarchus. The fleet itself was divided into squadrons of about 10 ships, often commanded by a centurion, a testament to the close integration of the army's organizational principles. Every man from the prefect down to the lowest sailor had a clear rank, a specific duty, and a place in the rigid chain of command. It was this incredible organization, as much as the strength of its ships, that made the Roman navy the undisputed master of the sea for over 400 years. The great fleets of the Roman Empire were more than just a collection of specialized ships. They were complex human ecosystems, rigidly stratified and ruthlessly efficient. While the lowest decks were a hellish prison for men like Catrux, the world on the upper deck, exposed to the sun and the sea breeze, was an entirely different reality. It was a world of free men, professional soldiers and sailors who, while living a life of extreme hardship and brutal discipline, were nonetheless servants of the state, not its fuel. To understand the complete picture of the Roman galley, we must climb the ladder from the darkness of the oar deck into the light.
Ow.
Let us imagine a young man named Lucius. He is 17 years old, a citizen of Rome, born to a poor family in the crowded Subura district of the city. He owns no land, has no trade, and his future is uncertain. For him, the Navy is not a punishment, it is an opportunity. He enlists voluntarily in the fleet at Misenum, signing on for a term of 26 years. It is a long and daunting commitment, but it offers what he cannot find anywhere else: a steady wage, regular food, and the promise of a respectable pension and a plot of land upon his honorable discharge. His life is hard, but it is a life of his own choosing, a path to security and status. Lucius is trained not as a rower, but as a sailor, a Noyuta. His job is to harness the power of the wind. He learns the intricate web of ropes, the complex language of knots, and the art of climbing the single massive mast of the warship. Even as it pitches and rolls in a heavy sea, his hands become calloused, not from the splintered wood of an oar, but from the coarse hemp of the rigging. His duties are skilled and varied. During long journeys, he and his fellow sailors manage the great square sail, angling the yardarm to catch the wind and moving the ship with a quiet efficiency that saves the strength of the rowers below for battle. In a storm, it is Lucius who is clinging to the rigging 100 feet in the air, desperately trying to reef the sail before the wind can tear it to shreds. His work is dangerous and exhausting, but it is a life in the open air, a life of skill and purpose. Alongside the sailors serves another class of free men, the Marines, the milites classiae. These are the ship's soldiers, the reason for its existence as a weapon of war. A typical Marine is equipped much like his land-based counterpart, the legionary, though often with lighter gear better suited for combat on a cramped and unstable deck. He wears a simple bronze helmet, a leather or mail cuirass, and carries the iconic short sword, the gladius. His primary duty is to fight. During the long, monotonous days of patrol, he keeps his equipment clean, sharpens his sword, and engages in endless drills on the deck, practicing boarding actions and formation fighting. For the Marine, the rhythmic thumping of the oars from the deck below is the sound of his own power. He knows that the 200 slaves beneath his feet are the engine that will carry him into battle, that will drive the ship's ram into the enemy's hull. When the trumpet sounds for battle, it is he who straps on his helmet, takes up his shield, and prepares to leap across the boarding ramp into a storm of steel and blood. His life is one of punctuated violence, of moments of extreme terror and brutal combat, followed by long periods of disciplined waiting. He looks upon the rowers below, not with pity, but with a mixture of contempt and grim necessity. Now the foul, it's the human machinery required for him to do his glorious work, to kill the enemies of Rome. These men, the sailors and the Marines, live and work under the command of a strict hierarchy of officers. The overall commander of the ship is the triarchus, the captain, often a man from a respectable provincial family, who is responsible for the vessel's navigation and its performance in battle. Guiding his decisions is the gubernator, the helmsman, or pilot. He is a highly experienced, professional sailor, perhaps a Greek or a Phoenician, a man who can read the stars, understand the currents, and steer the great ship with the 2 massive tiller oars at its stern. His skill is so vital that his pay is often many times that of a regular sailor. And overseeing the source of the ship's power is the man Catrix knew only as a voice of terror, the hortator or coxswain. From the perspective of the upper deck, he is not just a brute. He is a specialist, a musician of misery. His role is to translate the captain's orders for speed and maneuver into a language the rowers can understand, the language of rhythm. He uses his voice, a flute, or his heavy wooden mallet to set the beat, to increase the tempo for an attack, or to create the complex staggered rhythms needed for a sharp turn. A good hortator is a master of human endurance, knowing exactly how hard he can push the men before they begin to break, coaxing every last ounce of energy from their tortured bodies through his relentless hypnotic beat. So on the same vessel, 2 entirely different worlds exist, separated by a single wooden deck. Below, Catrix lives in darkness, filth, and anonymity. He has no name, no rights, and no future. His body is a consumable good, his life measured in the number of strokes he can provide before he expires. Above Lucius the sailor and his comrades live in the sun and the wind. Their lives are also hard, their discipline is brutal, and their risk of a violent death is high. But they have names, they have ranks, they receive a salary. They can complain about their rations. They can look forward to shore leave in a foreign port. And most importantly, they have a future. At the end of their 26 years of service, if they survive, they will be free to live out their lives as respected veterans, their duty to the empire fulfilled. This stark contrast is the very essence of the Roman world. It is a world where the lowest, poorest citizen, a man like Lucius, still stands a universe apart from the most physically powerful slave. The wooden planks of the deck, just a few inches thick, are a social and legal barrier more impassable than any ocean. It is the proximity of these two realities, the free soldier living and fighting directly above the enslaved engine, that makes the brutality of the galley slave's life all the more profound. The Roman Navy, with its permanent fleets and professional crews, was a formidable instrument of power. But its ultimate test, the campaign that would define its purpose and secure its legend, was not a war against another state, but a war against a shadowy, stateless enemy that had brought the Republic to its knees, the pirates of the Mediterranean. For decades leading up to the mid-1st century BCE, the sea was not the Roman lake, Mare Nostrum, but a chaotic and terrifyingly dangerous frontier. This was the age of the great pirate confederations, most notably the Cilician pirates. These were not small bands of opportunistic raiders. They were a sophisticated and powerful maritime force, a nation unto themselves. With their own fleets, fortified island bases, and a network that stretched across the entire sea, from their heartlands on the rugged coast of Cilicia and southern Anatolia, they launched raids with impunity. They captured grain ships, strangling the vital food supply to Rome and causing prices to skyrocket. They sacked coastal towns, carrying off their inhabitants to be sold in the great slave markets of Delos. They were audacious enough to kidnap high-ranking Roman officials for ransom. A young Julius Caesar was famously among their captives. The pirates had become a cancer on the sea, and Rome, for all its land-based military might, seemed powerless to stop them. The initial Roman response was a series of piecemeal, inadequate campaigns. A small fleet would be sent to clear a specific area, only for the pirates to melt away and reappear elsewhere. The pirates' light, swift ships, often lembi or mioparons, could easily outrun the heavier Roman warships. Their intimate knowledge of every hidden cove and secret harbor made them an elusive and frustrating foe. The situation grew so dire that by the year 67 BCE, the pirates were operating with near total freedom, their raids reaching the very mouth of the Tiber River, threatening the heart of Rome itself. The crisis demanded an unprecedented solution. The Roman people, facing starvation and national humiliation, passed a controversial law known as the Lex Gabinia. This law granted extraordinary, almost dictatorial, power to one man, the brilliant and ambitious general, Pompey the Great. He was given supreme command over the entire Mediterranean Sea and all its coastlines for 50 miles inland. He was granted a fleet of 500 warships, an army of 120,000 infantry, and a massive budget to see the task through. It was the single largest military command in Roman history, a concentration of power that made many in the Senate deeply nervous. Pompey's genius was not just in his military skill, but in his grasp of logistics and strategy. He understood that chasing individual pirate ships was futile. He needed to treat the sea itself as a territory to be conquered and pacified. His plan was a masterpiece of systematic warfare. First, he divided the entire Mediterranean into 13 distinct districts. To each district, he assigned a commander with a squadron of ships. This created a vast, inescapable net. Then he launched his grand sweep, starting from the west at the Pillars of Hercules. His fleets began to move eastward in a coordinated, relentless advance. They methodically cleared each district, not just fighting the pirates at sea, but also rooting them out of their hidden anchorages and coastal strongholds. The pirates, accustomed to being able to flee from one area to another, suddenly found there was nowhere left to run. As Pompey's forces advanced, the pirates were pushed further and further east, a great tide of them being driven back towards their homelands in Cilicia. After just 40 days, the western Mediterranean was completely clear of the pirate threat. The grain routes were secure. Now, for the final phase of his plan, Pompey concentrated his forces for a decisive blow. He sailed with his main fleet to the coast of Cilicia, where the cornered remnants of the great pirate armada had gathered to make their last stand. The final battle was swift and decisive. The organized power of the Roman fleet, with its heavy warships and disciplined marines, crushed the desperate but outmatched pirates. What followed was perhaps the most brilliant part of Pompey's strategy. Instead of crucifying the thousands of captured pirates, a typical Roman response to such enemies, he offered a pragmatic and surprisingly merciful solution. He understood that most of these men were driven to piracy by poverty and desperation. He resettled the captives in large numbers, moving them inland to sparsely populated areas and giving them land and the opportunity to become farmers. He turned a dangerous enemy into productive tax-paying subjects. In just under 3 months, Pompey the Great had achieved the impossible. He had utterly and completely eradicated the pirate menace that had plagued the Mediterranean for a century. The era of Mare Nostrum had truly begun. This stunning victory, a triumph of Roman organization and overwhelming power, was built on the backs of thousands of anonymous men. The 500 ships in Pompey's fleet required a crew of well over 100,000 rowers. Some would have been free Roman sailors. But the vast majority, conscripted for this massive, urgent campaign, would have been men like Caturics. They were prisoners of war, condemned criminals, and slaves purchased from the great markets, all chained to the benches below deck. The peace and security that Pompey's victory brought to the Roman world, the safe passage of grain, the prosperity of coastal cities, the freedom of travel were all made possible by the silent, unacknowledged suffering of the men in the darkness below. Their broken bodies and crushed spirits were the invisible foundation upon which the glory of Rome was built. The great machine of the Republic, in its most triumphant moment, was, as always, powered by human fuel. Our journey with the galley slave is now over. The rhythmic beat of the mallet, the crack of the whip, and the roar of the sea now fade into the quiet of the past. The ship has reached its final harbor. The oars are still. There's nothing left to do but to let go, to allow the gentle tide of silence to carry you toward your own peaceful shore. Let your mind drift on the great dark ocean of sleep. Rest well,